Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender is a very charming and engaging young adult romantic drama, and it's also one of the most banned books in the United States right now. I did a bit of research online and it's tough to find exactly where it's banned, but from what I can tell, it is heavily banned in Texas and Arkansas. Arkansas schools are banning it for being something that promotes transgenderism, and Texas is doing the same thing. I'm not entirely sure if it's just banned in schools in red states, if it's banned in libraries and bookshops as well, but it's definitely something that kids are discouraged from reading or even accessing in certain red states. And part of me's not surprised, but I also find it embarrassingly stupid. Obviously, so much of the legislature passed by these people is embarrassingly stupid and dangerous and is going to end up ruining the lives of many, many people. And that includes things like abortion bans as well as anti-queer stuff. But when you read this novel, it's so cringe to think that these people are afraid of it. Like I said, it's a charming YA love story. It's a really, really beautiful and engaging novel. And I'm not a YA fan. I don't read a lot of young adult literature as an adult. But oh my god, I was so gripped by this. Obviously, as a trans person, I relate to it really, really heavily, and I'm going to read out a few bits that I really strongly connected with. But aside from that, it's a brilliantly well-written and engaging modern novel. The idea that any kind of government body would be afraid of this is laughably embarrassing for them. Like, look at it. Imagine seeing this and going, oh, and then feeling like we have to protect the children from this sweet young love story. What fucking world are we living in? Jesus Christ. So this is one of the most banned books in certain parts of the US right now. This charming, coming-of-age romance tale. Alright. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So what's it about? So I read Felix Ever After for the Trans Girl April Readathon, hosted by my friend Say Kevi. I was really excited to read it for a few reasons. As I said, I never really read YA, and so it's a good excuse to actually read some YA. I've also been enjoying romance a lot more lately, and I wanted to read something romantic. And as a trans woman, I read a lot of books by trans women, and I have to admit that my transmasculine reading is not as broad. Kacen Callender is a transmasculine non-binary person who is also black, and so there's a lot of diversity here, a lot of opportunities for me and other people to learn from different perspectives, from a transmasculine perspective, from a teenager's perspective, and from a black American perspective. The experiences of a white, British, adult trans woman is going to be very different from the experiences of a young, black, American transmasculine teenager. Oh, I tried to get through all that without sneezing. The titular Felix is a young boy, age 17, he's getting ready to go off to college, and he was born and raised in Brooklyn. When he was 10 years old, his mother just left. She moved down to Florida to start a new life, and so Felix has been raised by his dad. When he was around the age of 12, 13, he came out as trans, and his father was good enough to help him, supporting him medically, paying for his top surgery. But socially and relationship-wise, Felix's dad has struggled with his gender, frequently dead-naming him and misgendering him. It's really been tough for his dad to try to understand his new son. He wanted to be a good dad and support him financially and medically, but he still struggles emotionally with it. This is something I massively relate to when it comes to my relationship with my parents, who are pretty much going through the exact same thing. So here's a little passage from page 22 that really hit me hard. We never talk about it. How he doesn't like saying the name Felix out loud. He'll always slip up and use the wrong pronouns and not bother to correct himself. How some nights when he's had a little too much whiskey or beer, he'll tell me that I'll always be his daughter, his little girl. That hit me really hard. I'd been reading the book for 10 minutes and wow, I was hit with something that I hugely empathized with and related to. This is a weekly occurrence for me whenever I talk to my parents. Being misgendered and dead-named is par for the course. However, my parents still love me and care for me and support me in every way that counts, except for actually recognizing that I am in fact a girl. I have some sympathy for them, of course, and Felix does for his dad. And it's a weird feeling where you do understand how it's hard for them, our parents, but you also think it would be so easy to just get recognized through language and connection. Boomers. So that's the first thing that Felix is going through. The other thing is that he is best friends with a guy called Ezra. Ezra's really wealthy. Felix and Ezra go to the same school. They both attend art class, and they are absolutely inseparable. Felix and Ezra spend all of their time together, sleeping over at each other's places. They're always in each other's pockets, to the point that Felix's dad and all the other kids in their class, all of their other friends, everyone thinks that they're a couple. People have avoided asking these two guys out, thinking that they're already with each other, but they're not. And in fact, Ezra, for a year, was dating a boy in their class who is incredibly toxic and mean and kind of the class bully, I guess. That class bully now hates Ezra, also hates Felix, and there's a lot of animosity between them, which is reinforced by the fact that Felix and this boy, Declan, I think it's Declan, both want to get into Brown. Felix needs a scholarship to be able to afford it. Declan is rich and doesn't need a scholarship, but will probably get the scholarship anyway. They're both good artists and they're trying to sort of compete. Then we have the event that fuels the entire narrative, which is this. Someone at some point hacked Felix's Instagram account, accessed old posts that he'd set to private, which had photos of him when he was pre-transition. They found his dead name, and they put all of these in a big gallery for all of their class to see. A huge gallery was put up full of all of Felix's old photos and his dead name. Felix is absolutely upset, traumatized, feeling abused, feeling vulnerable, and angry. And his friends are angry too, and they want to figure out who did this. And Felix is sure that it was Declan. He's so sure that he hatches a plan of revenge, which is this. He'll set up a fake Instagram account, and he will start chatting with Declan as an anonymous fake person, and he's going to try and catfish him. But it doesn't go according to plan, because when he starts talking to Declan as a different person, Declan opens up, and Felix, through this anonymous account, starts to see Declan as a human, starts to see a different side of him, starts to wonder if Declan really did do it. The two of them end up chatting constantly through messages, all of the time, slowly getting to know each other as fresh new people. Declan doesn't know it's Felix, Felix sees a different side of Declan, and their relationship takes on an entirely different form. Meanwhile, Felix's relationship to his best friend Ezra is hitting some bumps in the road, and Felix starts to wonder, okay, so if Declan didn't do it, who did? I have an invisible enemy around me somewhere, probably someone in my class. Maybe someone who's pretending to be my friend. Or maybe it was Declan. You have to read on and find out. Now, I've developed a new hobby recently, which is attacking blurbs. I love pointing out faults in blurbs. I can't help myself. I don't know if professional blurb writer is a job, but I think I'd be pretty good at it. For this one, the blurb mentions the fact that there is a love triangle. Now, Felix and Ezra are best friends. Ezra used to date Declan. Felix and Declan are getting close via messages. So you know that that's the triangle. So you go, okay, so at some point Felix and his best friend Ezra might end up together, or at least question their relationship and if it should be taken further. I was thinking this from the very beginning. I don't know if you're supposed to. I don't know if it's a twist or not, honestly, but I started pondering it because of the blurb. And that kind of irritated me, because I liked the platonic relationship between them. I didn't want to spend the book wondering if maybe their platonic relationship will expand into something else. I didn't like that. I didn't need that. But blurb's gonna blurb. What really surprised me as someone who doesn't read YA a lot, and anytime I do, I have the same old complaints, is that those complaints weren't there when I read this. Or at least they were for the first few dozen pages, and then it kind of relaxed. The biggest one is that when it comes to YA fiction, I often find adult writers trying to get into the heads and the voices and the behaviors of teenagers to be incredibly cringe-inducing. Using specific language, ways and manners of speaking, it's really cringe. And for some reason, most people don't seem to have a problem with it, but I find YA fiction to be quite vapid in terms of the way that the characters communicate with each other. The dialogue can be just heavy-handedly awkward. That happens quite a lot in like the first 20-30 pages of this book, and then it completely calms down, as if Callender found their voice and they knew what they wanted to say, but it took a minute to get there, and then they didn't go back and sort of smooth out the edges of the first few dozen pages. I feel like that's how it went, but I'm not sure. Or I settled in as a reader. I became used to it, and I became familiar with these characters and then I didn't notice it anymore. That might have been it. I don't know. But either way, for the majority, the vast majority of this book, I found the dialogue between the characters and their expression and their behavior not cringe at all, and in fact incredibly engaging and sweet and wholesome and dynamic. To the point that I actually think that the dialogue between characters is one of the book's greatest strengths. These kids talk with real enthusiasm. There is a really engaging human physicality to the dialogue in this book, where you start to feel like you're actually in the room with them, and when people are talking, you get the sense that they're overlapping. That's one of the big differences between real life and fiction, and you notice this a lot when you watch films, is that in films and TV shows, and obviously in books, characters give each other room to speak. In TV shows and films, so rarely do people talk over each other, interrupt each other, or does one person who's monologuing stumble over their own words, pause to think, say, it doesn't happen. Dialogue in films and TV shows is so fluid, and it's not how people actually talk. And in a book, it's very, very difficult to actually relay that through text, especially the idea of people talking over each other. That can be really hard to express through a book. But there is one moment in here, I don't know if I can find it, which at first read like something really confusing until I realized it was so indicative of ordinary life. Felix is chatting face to face with someone. He's got his phone in his hand and he's messaging someone else. And the text moves between the two things. You've got a conversation in speech marks, and then you've got the text messages in bold. And they're happening one after the other, overlapping each other. And at first I was so confused by it until I realized, wait, that's just normal life. We do that all the time. I've had a face-to-face conversation with someone while I've just been quickly texting on my phone, and it is like you're going back and forth, talking about one thing with person A and another thing with person B in your phone. It's completely human to do it these days. And it's actually expressed through the novel really brilliantly. I've never seen it done before. And I thought, wow, that's really dynamic, very relatable, very human, very true to life. Awesome. As you might have noticed, I've talked for a long time and I haven't really mentioned the transness all that much. Like, this book is heavily banned in so many places, and I don't have much to say about it. Felix being trans is inherently a part of who he is and the story itself. There is a transphobic attack made against him. He has an enemy somewhere nearby, someone who he should feel afraid of and threatened by, and he feels vulnerable. He's questioning his identity, wondering if he's in fact a trans guy or maybe a transmasculine NB, and that's a very important distinction. He's trying to relate to his dad and get his dad to see him as what he really is. All these things are really important. But the idea that a book would be banned for exploring these things is so cringe to me. It's really frustrating. It's a wonderful, magical book. I enjoyed it for so many reasons, both within the framework of it being a trans story and beyond that, as a romance, as a coming-of-age story, as a high school drama. It's so many different things. Felix Ever After is such a cool book because it manages to be very, very explicitly trans, and very much more than that. But more than is the wrong way to say it. Basically, Kacen Callender is reminding us that being trans is normal, ordinary, not something special to pay extra cynical attention to. This is a boy in high school, potentially falling in love, being bullied, making friends, falling out with friends, having a difficult relationship with his dad, who's of a different generation. These are things that are all so relatable no matter what sexuality, what sexual orientation, what gender you are. It's just relatable. And so it's pointing out that the trans experience is part of the human experience, and a trans person will experience all of the same dramas as a teenager that everyone else experiences. Him being trans is important, of course it is. It's integral to the story, and as a trans person, I relate to it very strongly. But it's also relatable in a broader sense, to remind you that trans people go through the same shit everyone else goes through. And then there's also the fact that Felix feels unlovable because, as he puts it, he may be one minority too many. He's queer, he's black, and he's trans. And he's now questioning his transmasculine identity as well, to a point. There's a lot going on with him, but it all still remains completely relatable, because questioning your identity, your personality, growing, changing, these are all just parts of being a teenager, a young person, a human. It's very relatable. The idea that something like this, that is so human, that is so empathetic, so simple in its relatability, could be banned is frankly so embarrassing. It's a really, really engaging, wonderful, romantic, sweet, kind, engaging YA love story and a coming-of-age story. I adored everything about it. I'm genuinely amazed by how engaging I found the dialogue, because I can be very cynical of YA writing. This is amazing. Absolutely brilliant. Probably my favourite YA novel. I haven't read that many, as I've said, but this is the one that I've found so important, but also just fun, entertaining, and beautifully written. Absolutely love this. Felix Ever After is a great novel. As a queer novel, as a YA novel, as a romance novel, as a coming-of-age story, as all these things, it is a great book. So check it out. Now it's time for my Patreon book recommendation of the week, and this recommendation comes from Brenditas, and it is Slewfoot by Brom. Brenditas says, I read this at the beginning of the year and also listened to it. Brom does the illustrations for the book, and here's the review I posted of it on Goodreads. This book made me angry, made me want to be a witch, and made me believe in magic. It shows what humanity will do in the name of religion as a means to their own end. Set in 1666, when women were firmly under the boot of men, and if stepped out of line would easily be cast aside and persecuted. Alright, that's enough to pique my interest. I'm going to check this out. I have an article and other videos, and I'm going to make a new video soon about witchy books. I love witch-related books, both fiction and non-fiction, so I'm going to check this out, and it'll probably be added to that list. And the fact that it's illustrated as well. Very curious. Going to check it out, and you should too. And if it's not banned in your area, for whatever stupid reason, go check out Felix Ever After. Read more books by trans authors, read banned books, and subscribe for books.